Hi there, Nick Dutch, back again. Continuing saga of my bread making experimentation. The few good loaves of bread that I've been able to make that were of course to my dietary specifications, namely gluten-free, wheat-free, sugar-free, yeast-free, dairy-free. I can't reproduce what I've done before again. I just can't do that. I've seemingly followed everything I've done previously, and the result was basically pretty terrible. So what I've done today is to get myself some very accurate measures for cup measures and also for teaspoon and tablespoon. So I've now got measures to measure out 1 cup, half a cup, quarter cup and an eighth cup, as well as a tablespoon, a half tablespoon, a teaspoon, half teaspoon and quarter teaspoon. Alright, and these are like the accurate, supposedly official quantities that you need. The other thing that I've learned is that you want to mix cream of tartar to bicarbonate of soda with a 2-to-1 ratio. And if you want to make the equivalent of 1 teaspoon's worth of baking powder just using cream of tartar and bicarbonate of soda, you have to make up a 3/4 teaspoon or 3/4 the amount quantity. So, as far as experimenting with flours are concerned, different types of flour, graham flour is brilliant for creating a bready texture if you're just using water as the liquid in your batter or in your dough. A mixture of graham flour and white bread making flour, which is also gluten-free. Bit difficult. The bread making flour, I believe now, and this is just a belief basically, is better designed for yeast based breads and is not very good for soda based breads. This may be to do with the way it rises or the way it breaks stuff down, or maybe what the yeast actually eats in the whole bread making mixture. I don't actually fully understand everything about the chemistry of baking, so I can't really tell you either way. The more experiments I do with the gluten-free bread making flour, white bread mix, which is in this case by a company called Dove Farm, the more I'm beginning to think that for soda breads it's not quite right. So what I thought I'd do is first and foremost try and work out what ratios I would actually need of the cream of tartar, the baking soda and quantities of flour full stop to be able to create the right kind of texture, and then to experiment further with different types of flour. For instance, I haven't tried rice flour and I haven't tried potato flour. Some forms of Indian flatbread require a blend of graham flour as well as rice flour. I've been told of a shop which has or does stock rice flour, so I'll have to experiment and have a look there next. So, this is my recipe so far for a graham flour bread based upon 2 cup measures of graham flour. Firstly, 2 cups worth of graham flour, a half teaspoon of cream of tartar, a quarter teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda, a half teaspoon of olive oil, and a half tablespoon's worth of lemon juice. Now, the way I understand it, and again this could be quite wrong, the reason that you add the lemon juice is to eat up any remaining bicarbonate of soda, because lemon juice is acid, bicarbonate of soda is base. So essentially you should be able to get much more raising, much more bubbly type effects going out through the bread, causing the leavening and so on and so forth. Graham flour itself seems to raise very nicely and very quickly. Okay, that's a good thing to use. The purpose of the olive oil, if I've understood this correctly, and I might not have done, so I'm just telling you what I think at the moment, is that the olive oil will help to keep the bread relatively moist. Okay, I've seen some recipes for parathas, and apparently parathas are chosen because they're very oily, and therefore if you go on a picnic they're more likely to keep their moistury, buttery kind of like consistency, and they stay a little wet for longer. They don't go off as easily or as quickly, and that's why Indian people take parathas on picnics. So maybe that's the value of the olive oil. Now, it's theoretically or hypothetically possible that one could use glycerin, because glycerin is a humectant. Is that the right word? I think so anyway. And anyway, it keeps moisture in. And maybe I could experiment with glycerin if I felt like it. I'm a bit dubious about glycerin anyway for health reasons, but I might still give it a go if I'm feeling experimental. So what I did with this is I preheated the oven to the maximum, which is 225 degrees Celsius on my fan-assisted oven. Okay. And when I say preheated, you know it's got a little thermostat in it that turns the electric on the elements and then turns it off when the temperature has actually reached the right level. Well, I waited until the thermostat itself had turned itself off. Okay, suggesting that the whole oven had reached that temperature. Then I basically put my mixture in. The mixture itself was the ingredients I mentioned above, mixed up with water until I had I described it as a stiff and creamy batter. It was like a bit of a solid blancmange. Okay, and I just dropped it into little piles or little blobs on a baking tray. I used 3 poachettes, they're called, which is just like a ring of metal. And I placed those in the baking tray, and I recommend that you lightly grease the baking tray and lightly grease your poachette rings before you put it in, or maybe a thick layer of flour. I presume that grease would be better considering the high temperature of the oven. And I slammed it in for about 15 to 20 minutes, and after that, boom, done. So essentially, if you're brave enough to experiment with graham flour breads, then essentially this could make you 3 sort of like muffiny things that aren't too bitter to the taste, because the bicarbonate of soda and tartaric acid will create bitterness. Alright, but it's not too bitter to the taste, it's risen nicely, and it tastes more or less bready as far as a graham flour bread can. Graham flour itself is made from chickpea, and it therefore has this like beany, kind of like nutty flavour, so you got to get used to it if that's what you want to use. As I say, my next experiments will be with things like potato flour and rice flour to see whether I can do the same with them, possibly without graham flour or mixed with graham flour in different proportions. Now I've got measuring units, I should be able to work out quite a fair quantity of precision as to which ones I want to use or what I want to use them for, and to see what I can get. But as far as quantities of flour is concerned, it's 2 cups worth of flour to half a teaspoon of cream of tartar, quarter teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda, half teaspoon of olive oil, and half tablespoon of lemon juice. I might want to try increasing the olive oil to possibly half a tablespoon as well to see whether that would possibly help, because I don't know. I'm doing this kind of blind. There's so many different recipes out there, and they've been made in so many different ways, that it's very difficult to say which ones would be the best, which ones would put out there on the internet and basically don't do any good. You know, which ones are useful or not. As far as using egg replacer, because I bought myself some whole egg replacer made essentially with soya, and this is like a powdered yellowy stuff, and I think that's better for cake type mixtures rather than for bread type mixtures. But again, I'm shooting in the dark because I'm trying to make a bread which doesn't contain dairy products and doesn't contain yeast and doesn't contain sugar. Alright? Your standard soda bread contains dairy products. It contains buttermilk, and that's not something I can have. So I've got to try and work with, very little. If I was to take those proportions and double them, I could probably make 6 rather large muffins, but it's got to be all those proportions all together. Alright, when I tried mixing half and half with the bread making flour and the graham flour with the same recipe, it took about 50 minutes to get something that would even be properly edible. because the inside remained so doughy that I'm pretty sure it wasn't very well cooked. You might actually have to leave, just for these like 3 bun-like cupcake things, leave the thing in the oven for an hour or maximum, just to try and make sure everything is cooked. And even then, I don't really trust it, or its effects upon your digestive system. Okay? So anyway, that's where I am at the moment. And if you get those measurements right, that's probably okay. I mean, I've still got a bit of a salty sort of sodary flavour in my mouth, but I don't think you can avoid that with a soda bread, especially one that doesn't have buttermilk in it. I mean, I did try and make one type of bread using rice milk, which I've made at home, which is basically just, you cook rice, and the water you cook the rice in is like your rice milk concentrate, and you can dilute that with water until you get the right volume that you need, and then you use that. Now that made a very good dough, a very good dough indeed, but on the other hand, it still tasted a bit rank. So I might think about getting a commercial rice milk and to see whether that would do it. But on the other hand, that's ratcheting up the cost even more. The cheapest I've seen gram flour around my way is about 97 pence for half a kilogram, which is not bad. Rice milks and soya milks actually costs a lot for the volume that you get. Okay, so it's not necessarily something you'd want to use all the time. The egg replacer was pretty expensive as well, so I'm glad I've now decided that at the moment I don't have to use that, or I don't think I need to use that right now. But the first major stage, namely getting the cream of tartar and the baking soda right, with reference to the volume of flour, that's gone okay so far. And I'm probably going to make some more breads like that before I turn in for the night. So I've got myself basically some muffins for the morning, and I can then just like slice them open and spread some margarine on them and have that with my cup of white organic tea, like the traditional Englishman that I am. Okay, well that's where I'm at the moment. Maybe by this time next year, I'll have the perfect allergy diet, bread for anyone who's really, really curious about how to actually get the perfect allergy type bread. This is more of a study than I ever thought possible. This has required more experimentation than I thought possible, just to try and make bread. For sake, it's bread, things that normal people have. But we're one step closer to the truth, okay? Experimenting with the laws of nature one step at a time, trying to be as scientific as I possibly can. Okay, speak to you in a bit.